Hello and welcome to the Cleverly Changing podcast. Our podcast is all about learning how to educate your kids. I'm one of the hosts, Elle, and this is episode 34. Today's episode is brought to you by Black Wall Street, the board game, and Play Black Wall Street Academy. This site supports the education of financial literacy for Black families. Visit playblackwallstreet.com and use the discount code CLEVERLY, that's capital CLEVERLY, all caps, for 25% off site-wide. The discount cannot be combined with any other discounts. In this episode, we talk about a sensitive topic that may not be suitable for younger children, especially if you have not had the discussion of police brutality with them yet. As a result, we have chosen to omit the Cleverly Cultured Kids segment in today's episode. If you find yourself homeschooling for whatever reason, this is an episode that you'll need to hear. If you're a new listener to our podcast, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I'm Elle, an entrepreneur, mom to twin girls, and this podcast is not only for parents who homeschool their children, but it is for all parents who want to supplement their child's education. Our goal is to provide you with encouragement, insight about African history, and support as a parent and home educator. New episodes are uploaded bi-weekly, so please remember to subscribe and share. If you want to keep this podcast going, please consider supporting it by donating to our Patreon page at a low monthly cost. Today's African proverb is, "A little hope each day can fill rivers to overflowing," which is a Liberian proverb. It's now time for the word of the episode. Dun, dun.
Matumaini means hope in Swahili.
It's interesting that today's episode is sponsored by Play Black Wall Street because in 1921, on May 31st, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, which was known during that time as Black Wall Street, it was reported that a Black man had raped a white woman, and the city went up in flames. 300 people died, that's recorded, but history tells us that even more people died, and 800 were injured. It's interesting that that city was in flames because right now on May 29th, 2020, the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota is in flames because George Floyd was killed by a police officer. Today's topic is about Generation Z who will soon be taken over. They will soon be in charge, and it seems like what we're living in are similar times as it was in 1921. So as you listen to today's episode, it's so important for us to teach our children about our history and to let them know that we have overcome things in the past and we will overcome today. We are a people who have faced many days and nights of adversity, but we do not let them hold us down. We do not let oppression get the best of us. We rise from the flames and we must unite. We must continue to learn, continue to grow, and continue to achieve. So when you listen to today's episode, know that although our history doesn't seem to change much, we are still a resilient people. So remember that today, and each day moving forward. Okay, welcome to another Cleverly Changing episode. I am one of the co-hosts, Elle, from the blog cleverlychanging.com. And today we have a special conversation with someone who is young and who has an opinion about what's going on in the world today. So we are going to get started. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sania, political science major. I'll be a graduate this summer. So yeah.
So we're just going to jump into the conversation. When I was young, I remember that the Rodney King riots took place. And
Yeah.
as far as my recollection, Rodney King was beat up by cops and it caused a riot in LA. And I just remember watching the news and seeing the city burning. And I didn't understand what was happening in the world in regards to race relations. I was pretty young around the time, and I really thought we had overcome many of the race relations issues. But now that I'm an adult and I'm a mom and an aunt and so forth, I see that we haven't really come that far.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hear from somebody who was really, it's the future generation. You're a part of the future generation. You're a part of you're a millennial just like me. So I guess we're a part of this generation. But
It's weird because some people say that I'm a part of Generation Z. Like, it depends on what you're looking at. Because I'm in 97, it's just like right there in the middle, kind of.
okay. So do you consider yourself a Gen Zer or a millennial?
I don't identify with that. I feel more like a millennial.
Okay. All right. So I want to know right now, I feel like every other month, really maybe even every other week, there is a new case that enters the news that is very upsetting. What happens is people are getting killed by the police, but every time that somebody gets killed by the police, it doesn't cause an uproar and riots and looting and burning of buildings like it does now. I remember I want you to tell me, when do you remember burning of buildings, riots, and looting taking place in response to police brutality?
I'm going to say, do you remember the last time we went to Myrtle Beach together? I don't, so I forget, I feel bad. It happened so many times. Well, it's so many names. I forget which one happened. Was that in 2026?
I
You
think
remember that?
I do remember the last time that we went to Myrtle Beach together.
And do you
I'm not 100% sure of the year, but it may be, you mentioned 2016. That very well could be 2016.
Yeah, do you remember? I forgot which one it was for.
I'm going to do a quick search and see.
Because I remember being on vacation and then at night watching the news.
Oh, that was
Is it?
Mike Brown.
Yes.
That was definitely Mike Brown, because
It
I
was Mike
remember
Brown.
I remember being on the beach, and in that particular instance, I had a cover up that had the United States flag on it, and people were like, "Is she aware of what's going on in
Right.
the world?"
And yeah, and I remember standing, it was me, mom, and my 4 little brothers, and this white lady came up and she was like, I just want to let you know that you guys, your sons are so beautiful. And I think that was her trying to tell us, that I'm sorry, kind of.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So
I
the
think,
Mike Brown case, to me, it shook me in a different way,
right.
because when it was happening, I remember going on Twitter and I remember reading someone's live feed that was doing a play-by-play of what was happening. And what he had recorded and what he had reported was basically Mike Brown was walking away. He wasn't even close to the police when the police shot him. So
Right.
in some instances, people often rebuttal that these killings are happening because someone is resisting arrest.
And I believe that's BS.
But in
It's
that
just,
particular instance, I remember hearing the young man say he shot him in the back.
right.
He wasn't even near him. He was walking away. And I just remember that. And I remember thinking, we haven't come very far. Those words entered my mind at the time.
Right.
So, do you know how old you were back then?
I had to be 17 because it was like the year before I entered. It was 2014, I think. So I had to be around 17 or 16. I'm gonna say 17, going on to college next year, getting ready to go to college when
Yeah,
that
it was in
happened.
2014. So you were right. It was in 2014 that it happened. It was August 9th, 2014, and it was right before we went on vacation. And while we were there, the nation was in turmoil, much
Yeah,
like it is today. And today, the story isn't about a teenager being gunned down. It's about a man who supposedly had been called, the police had been called because he had a fake,
allegedly forged a fake check.
allegedly,
Yeah,
yeah, which should not, my problem with each of these is that there's an accusation and then there's a death. Like
exactly.
it's like an execution that follows an accusation. And we were always taught growing up in the US that you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But
Right,
what we have been seeing playing out in the news, on the internet, on social media, in different places, what we see is that when there is a person of color involved, often the law is taken into the hands of other people. In the case of Trayvon Martin, it was the case of the neighborhood self-appointed watch leader. In the case of Philando Castile, it was the case where the police shot him.
yep,
In the case of Sandra Bland, we don't really have clarity of what happened to Sandra Bland. We know Breonna Taylor she was in her home and was shot. So we can just call out names really moment after moment after moment after moment because it's happened so many times. And in this instant, the police held his knee on the neck of George Floyd until George Floyd died. So from a young person's perspective, how does that impact you?
How does it impact me? Um, it really it impacts me greatly. Not only being a young person, but being a young Black person. It doesn't give you much hope, you know, but it also makes you want to do more. It makes you not want to give, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a very deep impact. It makes me sad to have 4 little brothers, but also with like Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor, it makes me scared for my own life. Like driving around in Philadelphia at night on my way home from work, it's very scary, and it's sad that my grandmom had to live through this, and now I'm also living through it. You would think that there will be much change between the generations, but it's not. We're living through our ancestors' generation all over again.
I think that's very powerful what you just stated. It's scary. It's a scary time. And I remember being in college, and one of the scholarships that I wanted to apply for but didn't was where you would write an essay about what's right with America. And I always struggled with thinking what is right, because as a person of color, it seems like what is wrong, we're constantly being bombarded with it. But I
Right.
challenge you to not just think that we don't have hope. And I know that it's hard to be hopeful in a world where you're not seeing people who are killing other people in cold blood murder being prosecuted. You don't see that. And I think that can be one of the problems, but we still have to have hope. We still have to believe that if we become legislators, if we,
Right.
make change, we have to believe, in order to be able to live, in order to be able to go through each day, we have to believe that this world can get better, that the policies that take place can be better. So I challenge you to believe that. And I know that it's a scary time because, I'm married to a Black man. And even though, he's an intelligent person who's well spoken, and, you know, it doesn't matter. In the world that we live in, it just doesn't matter. I watched a video just yesterday of a doctor who was standing in front of his house loading up supplies to treat the homeless for COVID-19, and he was arrested for littering what was allegedly littering, because there was no proof at the time. And it just seems like what takes place in America against Black and brown bodies is not fair. That we live in a world where it's not equal. And so when we read about the protests that happened during Dr. Martin Luther King's Day, and we read about the things that Malcolm X spoke against and fought against, it does seem like we are still facing those same times. But I refuse to allow the world that we live in to dictate my sanity and to dictate my hope. So I challenge you to still be hopeful, to still, get your education and fight for change. So just like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and, the leaders that we know of in the past, just like they caused an impact in their generations, we have to do the same today. And, when I see the looting and the riots online, I understand the rage. I remember when it happened not far from me in Baltimore after Freddie Gray's death.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time for a city to rebuild. And as much as I don't want the cities to be destroyed, I understand the frustration and the rage that comes with feeling like you are a Black person and you can simply be discarded because no one cares. And I understand that rage. And I understand that everybody isn't going to be nonviolent because everybody is impacted by this in a different way. But from a young person's perspective, what do you think we can do as the people who are here? We're trying to look at this from a rational lens, and there's nothing rational about it. So from your perspective, what can be done?
Rationally, we have to vote. That's what we have to do. And like you said, we have to get our people who look like us, or people who think like us, people who understand us and where we come from, into offices. That way stuff like this wouldn't happen. Like DAs. The DA of the in Georgia, where the guy got shot from running, didn't even want to prosecute the shooters.
Right.
Had
So
we
the
had someone,
district, you're talking about the district attorney in Georgia after the Ahmed case where he was jogging.
yep. I just think rationally, if we want to be rational, if we don't want to, I don't think it's irrational to loot and to protest and to destroy the cities. I don't think that's irrational at all. I think it's irrational to kill a man with your knee in his neck. But if we want to do it the way that they do it, we do need to vote, and not for the presidential election, because the president don't get much done, as we know. We need to vote locally. We need to vote in our, like, statewide. We need to vote for Senate. That's what we need to do. We need to run our own campaigns. Not only do we need to vote, but our people need to run.
Right. So it's about running for office. And I like that you brought up the Senate, because it really, even on a local level, it's finding out who those people who are on the seat to be judges are in your local districts. Find out who they are before you just go to the ballot and choose someone based on their party. You got to choose people based on their receipts. What have they done for you lately? Where's their mindset? Do they care about the issues that you care about? And so I love that you brought out, we definitely have to vote for people that care about us, but we also have to be the people running for those offices and running those campaigns. So I love that you're looking at it from a grassroots level, because if we want change, we have to be the change.
Yes. I wrote a senior thesis about that, actually. Well, first, my question in the senior thesis was like, why don't African Americans vote? And it ended up turning into a paper about descriptive representation, which is the reason why we don't vote, because we don't have people that we relate to in office. So as much as it is about voting, it's also about running and seeing someone like us and relating to that person. And that's almost the only way.
I also like that you said that in your perspective, it's not irrational to burn things because you're angry, because a system that has been passed down and is traditional in the country that you live in hasn't protected you. So what do? Yes, you vote. So that's one of the ways that, getting on the grassroots level, that's one of the ways we can impact change. But for the people who need, I can't necessarily explain why they're doing what they're doing, because we haven't necessarily seen it produce outcomes that impact change?
I think that it produced one outcome, and I think had we not done this, I don't think they would have seen our anger. And I think that's why we have to do both. Not only do we vote, but we need to show them that we are angry. I don't condone violence, but I feel like was kind of necessary in a way. Earlier, someone at my job was talking about it, and earlier I was just like, but now it's just necessary. I feel like, because it wouldn't have been brought up as much. This would have been lasted a couple days at most, but now stuff is on fire and everybody is like, oh, what's going on? I think it's necessary.
So I'm gonna just go as far as to say that if we were just angry on social media, our voices would be minimalized and people wouldn't realize it was as big of a problem as it is. It's not until it starts to affect people in the pockets and they see real tangible things burning that they realize the rage that exists. And it's like, this is impacting us so much that it has resulted to this. So it causes them to see in a greater and a wider magnitude of how much of a concern this is to our community when those things take place.
Right.
Wow. I think that's, that's a one perspective and one way to look at it. And I appreciate you for being honest and sharing, because, for me, it's always been a struggle to say, why are you tearing up your own communities? But in reality, while I say that in my mind, I also recognize that many of these communities we can't truly call home if we don't feel safe. So while we may physically live there, it may not be our home.
That's true. Yeah.
So wow, that's a pretty deep perspective. So, I want to bring up the young woman who recorded the video. I was scrolling through social media and I saw that she's having trouble sleeping. And rightly so, because if you see someone that is murdered right before your eyes, it is safe to assume that your life has changed forever.
Right.
If you could say anything to that young woman, how would you encourage her to keep going? Because I think on one hand, she saw it in person, but on the other hand, every person who looked at that video has seen it and they've been impacted. Not to as great a degree, but their lives have been changed forever. I personally, when I'm scrolling through, I can't actually watch those videos because it does something to you that I don't want to happen to me. So I've actually not ever seen any of those videos because it's not something that I'm willing to allow into my psyche. And that's just to protect myself so that I can, it's my coping mechanism in order to be able to go on. Because it's like when you do see something like that, it's hard to really separate it and place it.
Right. I agree. I haven't watched, I don't like to watch those videos either. However, her recording that video, although we've seen a lot of recordings of videos like that, but had she not recorded the video, who's to say what could have happened or what they could have said happened that actually didn't happen? We know exactly how he died. And for her, we have to thank her for that. It could have been a Sandra Bland situation easily where we don't know what happened to her, but she got it on video, and like we know who to hold responsible for this. We know that it's not a mystery. We know that the policeman killed that man because of her. And I know it's hard, but we have her to thank for that.
You're absolutely right. What was the feeling that came over you when you heard that the 4 policemen who were involved had been fired? Because that's for me, that was one of the first times where action had been taken so quickly.
I wanted them to do more than just fire them so quickly. To me, it's like, I don't think that should be surprising to us. That should be a standard. You know what I mean? And we should not be surprised by the policemen for getting fired for killing a man. That should happen every single time. I want us to make that a standard. I want them not only to fire them as soon as they did, but I want them to make arrests and not sit down and wait for charges and think about what kind of charges should we bring to this guy. It's obviously first degree, and then anybody who didn't do anything is an asset or an accessory to murder, and it should be made within that day, point blank, period. So I think it's progress, but it's progress that should have been made years ago.
Progress is slow.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like you can't even feel good for knowing that they've been arrested, because that is not enough. That is simply not enough. And to the family to Mr. Floyd's family, my heart goes out to them, because time and time again, when research is done and people look into the records of the officers who take these sort of actions, we often find that this wasn't the first time that something similar may have occurred. And so by the young woman taking the video and by those officers getting fired, what we do know is that they are no longer in the position to do it in that same capacity again. And for that, I'm grateful. But again, I am also with you in saying that I agree with you 100% that it's not enough. But to this next generation, I want to know, what have you been told to keep yourself safe? Because you talked about safety being an issue, and we don't want to live in fear, because that's no way to live. So, what have your parents told you about, or your mom told you about, how to keep yourself safe, and, told your brothers? What message do you have for other young people who are dealing with the same? And it's not just young people, it's all of us. for anybody who's living that is a person of color, this is something that we live on a daily basis. What do you think, and what have you been told to keep you safe?
Well, like by being stopped by police officers?
Yes.
Just to comply, basically, although that we know that does not do much, but you don't make any sudden movements. You let them know, I'm grabbing my license, this is what I'm doing. And I can't say that I was really taught that. Maybe my mom sat down with my brothers, but I think she tries to have us avoid those situations as much as possible, so that won't even happen. Like being safe, making sure our cars are okay, all our lights are on. If not, we're not driving the car. You know what I mean? Not being out too late. My mom is she has a hot temper. So to be quite honest, even seeing her getting stopped, I can't say that she always followed those rules. But yeah, we just try to avoid those situations.
Right. So prevention is the best key. So try
Right.
to, and I love that you brought that up, because we don't really know what the future holds, and there is no tried and true rule that we could share that will save somebody's life, because
Right.
we've definitely heard about people who complied, because all of the cases that we hear in regard, all of the eyewitness testimony that we hear in regards to Floyd, they all say that he was compliant from the beginning.
Yep.
So you're saying avoid the situation at all costs. And I think that,
Even that's
yeah, it's like
difficult to
drive
do.
the speed limit. Like we intentionally drive the speed limit. We intentionally try to follow the rules to the T. And I just, there really is a double standard in this world, because there are some children in this world who can act out and be youthful in the way that they're allowed to make mistakes. But
Right.
Black and brown youth of color, their mistakes can cost them their life in
Yeah.
ways that don't apply to other communities. And that is just completely different, and it's mind-boggling.
And it's very difficult for me to like see that this guy lost his life for an alleged forged check. Like I work at Best Buy and I see a lot of people the police get called on for much worse than forged checks, credit card fraud, still like theft. Sometimes the police don't even take them out in handcuffs. So I couldn't imagine us calling the police for fraud and then this guy is dying right in, the place that I work in. I just, because it doesn't, when I see it, I work in a place in the area that is outside of Philadelphia. So the population is mostly white. So the people that steal at that store is almost all white. And I've never seen a situation escalate so quickly like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying definitely struck me. And I know that the store owners who called the police probably are really feeling overwhelmed with grief, because had they not called the police, George Floyd would probably still be alive today.
Yep.
And I think it's very important for people to understand that forgery does not equal execution. It was wrong, and wrong behavior does have consequences, but the consequence should not at all have been death. And that's where we see where our lives are considered dispensable. And in this generation, in 2020, in this decade, we want more. We want more out of life. We want more accountability for officers. We want more accountability for people who are in charge, as far as your mayors, your governors, your judges, your DAs, your prosecutors, even the defense attorneys, because sometimes in many cases, the defense attorneys that are appointed for free, in many cases, they're not even doing a good job to represent their
Horrible.
clients. So we want better for people of color in general on all fronts.
I agree.
So in closing, what words do you want to leave with the audience? What do you want them to know about young people who are living today? How, we are angry because our world hasn't gotten better.
But I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So what do you want the audience to know in regards to these situations? We're angry because things haven't gotten better, but what can we say going forth? What can we tell the young generation to do? And what do, should our parents be having town hall meetings with their kids? Like, what more can be done?
Of course. Encourage to vote if you're over 18. Let's encourage everybody to vote. Let's take younger kids to town hall meetings, and let's not let this disappear. Let's keep on pushing. Even if we don't have a next victim in the next couple months, it needs to continue. We need to continue keeping this pushing and raising awareness so we can prevent another Black man or woman from dying at the hands of police officers.
Well, thank you so much for spending time to talk to the Cleverly Changing audience. I appreciate just hearing your words and getting to know what is on your heart when it comes to this situation. I also consider myself a young person, but for the generation that's even younger than me, it's like, I don't even know what to tell you guys, because
Yeah.
I thought things had gotten better, but obviously that wasn't the case. And as social media has brought to light what has been going on all along, it's like it's pulled back the layer of an onion. And each week we find that there's a whole nother ugly layer that exists. And it's like, wow, what do we do? And so I think the words that you have just given us are words of hope and wisdom. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you being so open and candid to share your thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. That's all, folks.